If you've been scrolling through a dozen shaper listings, watching endless best-of videos, and still can't tell which machine will actually survive the grind of a busy workshop, you're not alone. That hesitation usually comes from two places: the fear of dropping a few $100s on a tool that won't cut the material you need, and the worry that the big horse specs on the page might be more flash than function. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, because that's where you can see the exact model number, the voltage options, and the price point before you decide whether to add it to your cart. In today's review, I'm going to walk through the Jet 11/2 HP Spindle Shaper, JWS20CS, and try to give you the kind of practical insight that helps you decide if this is the right machine for your shop or if you should keep looking. Let's start with the core question: what does a 11/2 horsepower motor actually mean for a shaper? In a shop that does occasional edge forming on hardwood, a horsepower unit is often sufficient. But if you're pulling 3-inch strips from a dense hardwood laminate, or you need consistent torque while routing a groove for a drawer bottom, the extra half horsepower can be the difference between a clean cut and a motor that stalls. The Jet's motor is rated for both 115V and 230V single-phase, so you can run it on standard residential power or on a heavier-duty circuit if you have one. In real-world terms, that means you can tackle a batch of 2x4s for a small cabinet project without constantly having to back off and let the machine cool down. That is a real benefit if you value throughput over a few minutes of downtime. Now, the design of the stand often comes up when people weigh shaper options. The Jet Shaper sits on a fully enclosed, heavy-duty steel frame that you can roll out of the way when it's not in use. The removable cover on the top makes it easy to reach the motor for maintenance, something you rarely see on lower-priced units where the motor is hidden behind a sealed housing that requires disassembly. For a hobbyist who plans to keep the machine in a garage or a small shop, that accessibility is a practical win. You can brush away dust, check the belt tension, or replace the motor without needing a crane. One of the most useful features, and a point that often gets lost in the hype, is the independent left and right fences with micro-adjustment. In a typical shaper, you're limited to a single fence that you have to reposition for left-hand or right-hand operation, which adds setup time and can lead to alignment errors. With the Jet, the fences slide on separate tracks and lock into place. In practice, this means if you're routing a 10-inch wide dado on a piece of plywood, you can set the left fence, make the cut, then flip the workpiece and engage the right fence without remeasuring. The micro-adjustment knob allows for a fractional inch of movement, which is handy when you're trying to get a dead exact width on a decorative edge. Speed control is another area where everyday use shows its worth. The Shaper offers 2 reversible spindle speeds. The slower speed gives you higher torque, ideal for hard woods or larger cutter bits, while the faster speed is better for delicate routing or finishing passes. In my own shop, I've found the slow and steady setting to be the one I use most when doing an inch groove for a cabinet back, because it reduces the chance of burning the wood fibers. The reverse function is not just for left-hand operation, it also lets you clean up a notch from the opposite direction, which can reduce tear out on fragile laminates. The handwheel is oversized and positioned for easy access, so you can make a quick, precise adjustment without having to shift your stance. When you're trying to make a series of identical cuts, that ergonomic detail actually speeds up production because you aren't hunting for a tiny knob. Coupled with the interchangeable inch-and-inch collets, you have a decent range of bit sizes that cover most hobby-level routing tasks without needing a separate set of adapters. Let's talk about the trade-offs. First, the unit is on the heavier side. The steel stand is solid, that's good for rigidity, but it also means you'll need a clear floor space of at least 4 feet square to accommodate the base, the motor housing, and the clearance for the spindle to clear the workpiece. If you're in a cramped apartment workshop, you might find that the shaper simply won't fit. Second, the price point sits in a mid-range bracket. You're paying a premium for the metal enclosure and the dual fence system, but you're not getting any of the high-end conveniences like an electronic speed readout or a digital torque monitor that you might see on a $2,000 professional model. So the value you're getting is really about mechanical simplicity and durability, not about tech bells and whistles. Who should consider buying this shaper? If